Okay. All right. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us live. This is going to be quite a conversation today. I'm here with Michael Stillman, and Michael is the president and founder of Quality Branded Restaurants, 12 restaurants that include Quality Italian, Quality Bistro, Quality Meats, Smith Wollensky, amongst others. So thanks, Michael. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Stephen.
All right. Before we get into it, and let me tell you, I mean, we talk all the time during all of this. People are really excited, anxious, curious to hear what you have to say today. I mean, restaurants are a main part of obviously, of our economy, of our city, of our culture. So before we get into it though, tell me how you're doing, a little bit of background, family, where you're out in the Hamptons, but today I know you had a busy day. You're in the city, right?
Yeah, we're managing, we have, a skeleton crew of our top people working through everything. All our restaurants are currently closed except for, we have a Quality Italian out in Denver that's doing delivery.
Right.
We're looking into some delivery in New York. My kids and my wife and I are managing. She's really busy at work, so she's making up for our slow times. But it's been a really interesting moment. I would say, there's been a lot of, obviously great hardship in the restaurant industry, and I think in a lot of industries, and a lot of challenges, particularly for our staff, many of whom are sort of working week to week, paycheck wise.
Right.
I would say that the outpouring of affection for restaurants in the community in New York, and I think frankly in the community around the country, has been amazing. And that's one of the sort of silver linings of what's going on, is seeing how much people, as you said, genuinely care about restaurants, care about the people in the restaurants, their local community, how those people are really part of the fabric of their life. And it's really nice to hear in this moment, because there really is a big challenge for restaurants when it comes to, current health needs and restaurants sort of, reality from an economic standpoint.
Yeah. It's true. As you said that, I think about restaurants that we go to often, where we know the waiter, the maitre d', maybe the owner, and they're familiar faces. And of course, food and being fed is such an integral, important bonding experience. And these are people you see and you come and you like seeing them. They're part of it. So it's part of the experience.
It's a really unique challenge for us. It's almost like one of those Chinese, finger pulls. Because, our restaurants, and most restaurants are really based around social interaction to some degree. It's great food, hopefully great atmosphere, but it's a lot about the people who work there, your interactions as guests, your interactions with other people. And we're very cognizant of the health concerns. In fact, in New York City, it's been very, very serious. And we've seen it affects our former employees greatly. We've had people pass away in the last couple months. It's been, very extreme. So we really take seriously the health concerns. We also really take seriously the economic stress of this on us as a business, but for our employees first and foremost, who really, a lot of them do not have the bandwidth at all to withstand that.
Right.
And trying to navigate how we get restaurants going again economically, but control the health and safety of both our employees and our customers is so critically important. And those two are really, to some degree, diametrically opposed right now. And I hope it won't be the case for long. And I think people are really trying to be thoughtful about how to balance those out. But it's a real challenge currently. I don't think there's a clear answer to that.
No, it's true. This has brought the humanity out in business. We've seen it in our business that, right, we're here to run a successful business and make money and grow. But there's the whole, as you say, the human component. I remember early on when we first started talking, maybe the first week in quarantine, and I've said this to you before because I've told other people, you inspired me. You were grounded. You were in reality, but you were encouraging and positive and said, it's New York City and we'll get through this. We'll end up on a, eventually we're going to have to get through it, but we'll end up in a better place. But what you said, you came back immediately to your employees and you touched on that immediately. So I want to ask you, what are you doing? Is there something keeping in touch with those employees now? You have a lot. How many employees?
Keep in mind, so we had 1,200 employees.
Right.
We currently have about 18. We were
currently staying, right. The others were furloughed or they were part-time.
They're no longer our employees, frankly, to a large extent. And I think that's part of the challenge that people have to understand. I read a Bain company, article basically said that the average retail business, I think, carries 24 days of cash at hand. And I think it was 16 days for the average restaurant in America. So 16 days of cash, and we've now been under mandated 100% lockdown for almost 12 weeks. Like, every restaurant is beyond out of cash and broke, even without paying rent or carrying employees, right? That money is all gone. And, if you look at even a company of our size, to cover 1 year's of payroll would be 10 years of profits. So you would not be able to cover, 1 month's of payroll without a year's of profit, and you would not be able to reopen anything. So the reality is, for those of us with multiple restaurants, some will close permanently for sure. And those employees will not have jobs immediately. And then the ones that you do open, if there are 50% occupancy restrictions, let's say, that basically necessitates 25 to 30% of your employees. So if we had 12 restaurants and now we have 8, and of those 8, they have 50% occupancy restrictions,
right?
When we're allowed to reopen in the fall or whenever, we have 300 of those 1,200 employees even coming back to jobs, which is just a tiny fraction for many, many months. And that's a real issue. And I think people don't understand how big the number is and for how long. Like, it'll be 2-3 years till we even get back to close to the same number of employees. And that's a really big, significant issue, especially because, hospitality and restaurants and, are one of the biggest employers of, low-income employees in the United States. And there's a real challenge at hand here, and I don't think it is a short-term challenge.
Tell me what, do you have any idea? Have you heard about timing? What do you, I know you're, involved with associations and your fellow.
We're very involved. I'm a founding member with 2 different groups, ROAR, which is a great New York State and city-based group, and the IRC, which is a great group in DC, and they've both done a lot of work on a variety of different lobbying efforts and have been really close at hand and are really actively involved. And I think, the overall feeling is the government is working very hard, and I think we may say that a lot of people have taken missteps in various places, but everyone's working very hard to try and be creative and figure out the resolves here. It's been very challenging in a lot of ways. I believe that New York City, they are not really sure. I think both Cuomo and de Blasio, from what I've heard, are really trying to be very careful to really follow the health statistics, and I think that makes sense. My guess is the earliest you're talking about restaurants reopening is late July or early August, and that's maybe like an outdoor only scenario. And then you're probably looking more at like a September, October for any real indoor restaurant opening. And at that point, it will probably be with restrictions like 50%, and restaurants which at full capacity run at a 10% margin,
right,
lose money hand over fist at 50% capacity.
So what that gets back to, we had touched on, early on, again, I asked you, and so many people, when I tell people what we're going to be talking about, our next topic, everyone said that, oh, well, are they doing takeout? And everyone assumes, oh, just do takeout or, delivery. Talk a little bit about that in this business model.
Delivery, has some potential, but As
You're doing it. You're doing it in Denver now, right?
No, we're doing it in Denver now. We're doing it there as a precursor to opening because we believe the opening may be sooner than in New York City, probably will be sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Doing it fully closed is very, very challenging because you're carrying basically a lot of the same staffing that you would be using when you're open for a la carte. So if you have, 4 chefs and 2 or 3 people in the front of house helping, those are all bodies that would be doing similar stuff when you're open for business. So the ancillary benefits of delivery when you're already open
Mm-hmm.
is a lot bigger than when you're fully closed. When you're fully closed, you're sort of doubling down on a lot of those costs. And it really isn't nearly the same kind of money that you're making when you're doing dining. Even though you don't necessarily have all the front of house staff, you have a lot of the same, costs. You have, 20 to 25% fees from delivery services.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Basically equal your front of house costs. And, people tend to spend a lot less. You order one course, you eat more casually, you don't order, even though now, and it's great that people are able to sell wine and liquor, and that's a big help. It doesn't equal nearly the economics of what you're doing in restaurants, let alone restaurants where there's tourism and private dining. So while it's a help, it's really a drop in the bucket in terms of the problems, and it certainly doesn't make up for in any way the economic difference.
And certainly for your restaurants that are set up, they're experiential. I never thought about how much. I was saying to Kirk, we go out to eat, but no, you go out to eat, as you said, because you see your favorite, you see friends, or you're with friends, or you see your favorite waiter, you love the food, but you're in a group setting, there's an energy or a vibe.
That's absolutely right. And also when you think from a real estate standpoint, you think about the economics of delivery. Well, a restaurant that's planning on delivery being a big component, like a Sweet Green maybe, or a barbecue restaurant, or a small local, restaurant, they will pick a different sort of rent structure. They're not focused on, where it is prominently on a corner, this or that. They're not built for front of house space. They're built to maximize the kitchen, the efficiencies, the rent, the way it's built. It's built for that to make sense.
Right.
Now you're trying to turn something that was built to make money in a totally different way with a certain sort of rent structure, a certain sort of percentage of front of house. It's built to do X, Y, and Z, right? And you're trying to make it as economically viable. It really doesn't work. So while the delivery helps John George or helps me, our restaurants are not physically built for that to make sense. And even if you sort of try and change some of the dynamics, which you will, you're sort of already at a real disadvantage because you're trying to put a round peg into a square hole from the basic setup and your cost structure.
Right. Okay. So Michael, there's questions coming in as we go, and everyone feel free to send your questions. I'll pepper them in as we go. So talk to me about you're this experiential type restaurant. What might look different? What are you thinking about in the future that could be different, that could work? Something that twist or a tweak that might help the situation or the economics of your business.
I think we're thinking of some creative economic switches that people may feel more comfortable with. I think we're also thinking about different ways we can still, in this sort of environment, be fun and engaging while still being safe. So we're thinking about both things. We're thinking about stuff like more timed out meal slots, which helps you from a social distancing standpoint. Mm-hmm. And in Europe, in a lot of major cities, if you have a two-top, instead of your 7:30 reservation, it'll be 7:30 to 9. That helps us with turns. It's usually not a strong push, but almost like a recommendation to the guest. But right. It helps a lot economically. It helps with social distancing. It's a small ask for customers, but makes a big difference for us. A bigger difference is something like dynamic pricing that you see in hotels and in airplanes and in Broadway shows, where you're paying for the time and date. If you want a December Friday 8 p.m. table, that should have a greater value than if you're willing to have a January Sunday 5 p.m. because there's greater demand, and hotels are like that, planes are like that.
Sense.
I think the technology is caught up with restaurants that probably will be the future,
right?
But I don't think the immediate future. In terms of things that we can do that are creative and fun and unique in the meantime.
I have to step back. That piece is so interesting. It seems like common sense. You're right. All these other industries have been doing it. You know, you want orchestra seats, you know, the producers' seats. You pay the most on a Saturday night. Those tickets are more expensive than a matinee on Wednesday.
And I think the average customer says, well, I'll pay less for a discount, but I won't pay a premium for X. But I think if they look at it fluidly, the people who want to pay a premium for that premium spot are happy to do it, hopefully. The people who are willing to take a less in-demand time frame are happy to do that and pay less. And the economics work more fluidly and better and keep the restaurants in business. So hopefully it is a win for all parties involved. And I think that's why a lot of these other places have gone to that model. I think in the short term, you know, I think it's having, you know, guests be understanding that we need help in trying to make this make financial sense. But also having us understand that asking guests to pay more when this environment in the different sort of medical things in the short term may be very onerous is a very tough ask. And I think it's going to be a period of time here until we have better treatment and a vaccine where that's going to be a very, very tough ask. And we're trying to think creatively about what we can do in that period. But I think it's going to be easier for smaller neighborhood restaurants than bigger box restaurants to understand and come up with.
You're saying the smaller ones to pivot on this?
I think they'll be able to.
In the interim.
They'll be able to handle the local environment a little better, a little differently than the larger box places where it's just going to be complicated economically to work, and the demands of what you need to charge for those places to make sense against the complications of all of this will be very tough short term, I think.
Got it. Okay. So I know you grew up, you're born and bred in New York City. You grew up in
Midtown.
Right. There you go. You grew up in the restaurant business. Your father, you know, started restaurants and you learned the business from him.
TGI Fridays.
So that I loved his story. So Michael and I met. We, you know, Michael was referred through. We have a mutual friend, Mala Sandler, who's a broker out here in the Hamptons, and Mala referred Michael and Allie. And when they were looking to buy and sell their own apartments, so your dad came to look at an apartment, and then you had to leave. But he and I just took a long walk, and he told me the whole story about when he sold TGI Fridays, which is quite a story we won't get into now, but his perspective of what happened is interesting.
And I talk to him every day, and he's been super, super active in this whole process. Is at 83, having done this for over 50 years, he has a lot of history and understanding about New York and the dynamics of what might work.
So you two are sharing and trying to bounce ideas off the wall and see some creative what might work.
For sure. I think we're long-term players. We believe in New York City long-term. You know, I do think there will be challenges in the short term for sure. You know, I've read a lot of the articles that say this is the fundamental change in how to New York City structure. I think there will be changes, but New York has always been a place that is very dynamic and has managed to be a sort of chameleon as a city. And I think we're going to find ways to do that over the coming years. I think it's figuring out what those creative changes will be that will make sense for New York City. But we still believe in New York City long term.
I love that. Yeah, I tell all my clients, you know, they ask me what's happening and when and how, and we don't have the answers per se, but I don't think it's a matter of if New York will come back. It's just a matter of when, and it will come back in phases, as you talked about. The interim, we've got some tough times to get through. But New York City, there's a certain vortex, and there is something very special about New York City. Okay. Anything else you want to touch on or share? I know that people are really, you know, when someone asked me the restaurant I miss the most or what's my favorite restaurant, and it wasn't even that. It was just the thought of just being able to, on a whim, just go sit at the bar at a restaurant and just order a meal. It's so simple, but when you can't do it, it really.
I think we are so eager to be out there, having our customers, having our employees back in these stores again. It's finding the balance of, we want to do it in a manner that we think, creates the environment that people want long-term, and we want to be able to do it in a safe way. And we're very, cognizant that as financially challenged as we are right now, we have to, really approach this and understand what's the best, safest way to approach this process. And, for your example, you love being at the bar at your favorite restaurant, but what if, you can't sit at the bar because, in the state of Colorado or the state of Florida, they said you can't even sit at the bar, or your maitre d' that always says hello is wearing a face mask behind plastic 8 feet away. How is that experience going to be for you? And frankly, is that even enough to make it healthy enough? And I think we're trying to figure out the right balance. We want to open soon. We want to open safely. We're really trying to be thoughtful about that. And that, brings upon restaurants a unique economic situation. And we're really looking to landlords, investors, the government, everyone, our customers, to understand how challenging it is to both create a safe environment, to create an environment that people want, that feels like what they had, to balance all that out the right way, and the kind of economic strains that brings. And I think it's only going to really work for restaurants if we sort of have buy-in and partnership from our landlords, from our government, from our customers, who say this is an important piece of the fabric of New York City, and we all need to find a new permutation that works for everyone.
That's beautiful. I love that. I love that. I want to you touched on landlords. So that's a big part of your business for the most part. You're in touch with all of them.
We're in conversations with all of them. We have very good relationships with our landlords, even where we're having a lot of trouble. We feel like we have very good relationships with our landlords. We've always tried to approach our landlord relationships like a partnership, and we think they are. This is a real challenge because I think the economics don't make any sense for restaurants or landlords right now. It's different, I think, even for their commercial tenants or their office tenants, but the economics on the restaurant side and the landlord side, they're very, very challenging for both. And I think we really have sort of been in a let's wait and see process with our landlords and trying to have great communication. I think they want us there. They want restaurants to work. We want to be in buildings, but it's hard to figure out the balance. There's going to need to be other parties involved to help make it work.
Got it. All right. You're right. It's about partnership. There's that humanity, all of us coming together business-wise, but also, as you said, the patrons coming and doing their part. And, God willing, I know you'll be back, and I look forward to that. So I'm going to just shift. You'll be back. I'll shift to personal. All right. So we're living in these crazy times. Surreal, right? If you told us 4 months ago we'd be talking about this from a guest room.
I found in my briefcase a note I had from our PR group from I think like early March or late February, and it had a list of spring and summer trends for us to think about. Fiddlehead fern season. June 7th is National Lobster Day, and I ran into it. I'm looking at this thing. I'm saying this was a reasonably serious concern that I had a conference call about at some point at the end of February was Fiddlehead fern season. Right. And now this is where we are. But hopefully in a year or two, we'll be back to Fiddlehead fern season.
There you go. That's what we're striving for. All right. So of all this, what have you learned about yourself personally? Good, bad, or ugly?
It's a good question. It's a very good question. I think I've learned that, in spite of my sort of like natural tendency to short temper, I feel like I have a little more bandwidth than I expected. And And I think I've hopefully kept to a reasonable vision and an understanding of looking at the lifespan of things instead of being too myopic about this. I think I found a greater sense of community in the restaurant world, which is something that we've always had to a degree and I've shied away from, but the amount of community with the restaurateurs that I've seen in the last 2 months has been tremendous. I think the outpouring of their understanding for the people that work for them and their attempt to try, even while their businesses just die on the vine, to take last dollars and squeeze out some healthcare or some groceries or whatever they can do, has been tremendously inspiring for me in ways that I think are challenging me to focus even more on those things. And I've been really impressed with the commitment of a lot of the restaurateurs all over the country and the world. So that, I think, sort of changed my thought process a little in this. And I tried Peloton for the first time. So, like, you know, I normally like the community of like a class or just going for an outdoor jog, but hey, it's not bad.
There you go.
Don't hate it.
So here's where I got major points with Peloton. Early on, I had to go back to the city and pack some stuff up, and I surprised Kirk. I actually packed up our Peloton and brought it out here. So I've not been on it once, but he loves it. So there you go.
It's the thought that counts.
There you go. There you go. All right, Michael, this was wonderful. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're busy today. All right, everyone, thank you for joining us. Stay tuned this Friday, May 29th, when Tim will be speaking to Dan White. Dan White is the magician at the Nomad and featured on Jimmy Fallon. Because, Michael, we could use some magic right now, right?
Dan's awesome.
All right. Talk to you soon. Thanks, Michael.